because in the end, there is fraud in every election. And unfortunately, when misinformation leads to untruths, it helps people lose faith in our election system. And our goal is to go around this country, talk to local election administrators, and ensure that they get their voices heard so that Americans can believe that we have the freest and the fairest election system in the world.
And looking at the states and what works and what doesn't work. So the fact that we continue to have a paper trail here in Iowa. So not only do we have an electronic ballot system, but we keep the paper trail, we have logs. So, being able to get these stories about how that process worked, what went through to ensure that every legal vote that counted, and it was legal ballots that were counted, then the process for ensuring that they were counted. I think those stories, that testimony is very important. In Iowa, we know that our system worked. We know that people can have confidence and trust in our system because of the election law changes that we made. Our voter ID that was upheld by the Supreme Court, and then codifying an identification process on the absentee ballot request. All of those things have led us to the point where we had the largest turnout in the past election cycle that we've had. And so I think, for Rodney-Davis and the House Committee on Administration, faith in election law, I think it's important that they compile those stories, they visit other states and find out what works, what doesn't work, where can we do better, and why it's important for us also to talk about H.R. 1, which is now H.R. 4, and why getting rid of voter ID laws is not a good idea. Why that federalizes elections rather than builds on the great processes that states have put in place.
Well, I'd certainly hope that, us being here and having you here and covering this ensures that some of our local auditors here in the state of Iowa and our county clerks in the state of Illinois get a little more attention on what they do to make sure that it's not about Republicans and Democrats. It's about giving every voter in each jurisdiction the opportunity to cast their vote if legally able to do so.
So speaking of county auditors and local election officials, I guess I couldn't help but notice that the Scott County auditor and I guess Scott County election officials, aren't here, didn't participate in this. And my question is, there was a forum last week or maybe 2 weeks now where the county auditor talked about the recent changes made to Iowa's voting laws, and there was a lot of confusion and a lot of worry among particularly older voters about how those new restrictions were going to impact particularly elderly individuals, shut-ins, people with disabilities, and that they would have a shorter amount of time to be able to turn in their ballot. Go ahead.
Let me ask you, as somebody from Illinois who's not here able to vote in Iowa, what restrictions are you talking about?
Shortening the early voting window, shortening the period of time that absentee ballots can be sent out by county auditors, not being able to, I guess, for county auditors to kind of pre-populate absentee ballot forms that they can't, I guess, proactively send out absentee ballot request forms that voters have got to request that now.
So to send out an absentee ballot request form without it being requested, and so we still have over 3 weeks of early voting. So you can request a ballot by mail, you can go in person and vote in the polls because they're early, and then they're open on election day. So when you have almost a month of time to vote, 6 days a week at the courthouse, in mail or in person, it seems like there is adequate time for people to be able to vote, whether you're able to go to the poll and vote in person on the day of the election or able to vote by mail. So pre-populating information was not something that was done in this state. County auditors, to my knowledge, did not have the authority to do that, and did not do that until the legislature passed a law. And we passed a law because in the Supreme Court, when they ruled that voter ID was in fact constitutional, but on the absentee ballot request form, it had to be codified. So what we did was codify on the absentee ballot request form what we had for in-person voting, and that was some method of identification. And I think when you look at what happens when there is voter ID and people can trust the system, more people vote. And that includes in low income and minority areas as well.
Yeah, House administration is the smallest full committee in Congress, and we have jurisdiction over the election system in this country. And again, our Constitution gives our state government and our local governments the ability to run our elections in their local and state jurisdictions. And the state legislators passed laws that were, we were told that those laws here in Illinois or in Iowa were going to suppress the vote, that they were too restrictive. Well, did we see evidence of that in the last election? I think there was record turnout. When you have record voter turnout, it's pretty difficult to be able to say that somehow voters are being restricted from being able to legally cast their vote. And I think what leads to a lack of faith in elections a lot of times is messaging coming out talking about how restrictive and how different measures are leading to voter suppression, how it's going to adversely impact the voters, when in reality the numbers and the facts don't add up to that. And really what we've seen, that messaging hasn't changed, because we see it in Washington, D.C. If voter turnout is not a model to be used to talk about how things are going right in this country, then why was it used to base the entire Voting Rights Act in the 1960s, base the covered jurisdictions that were supposed to be covered by DOJ was based on voter turnout? So it can't be good then for the Voting Rights Act and then bad now. So my message to you and my message to those who feel as though that there are too many restrictions in the state of Iowa, the facts don't add up. And I would suggest the messaging of somehow these are restrictive and these are suppressing the vote. I suggest you join us in talking about the truth, talking about what's good that's happening here in the state of Iowa, talking about what's good that's happening in our election system, because otherwise it's helping to lead to a lack of faith in our election system, which is the antithesis of what many on the far left are talking about right now.